Welcome back to News in Focus. Now, as the Government of National Unity takes center stage in its first week after being named, much of the conversation has shifted as to how the opposition parties will fare during the seventh administration. Now, the MK party is the official opposition based on numbers, but parties like the EFF and Bold One South Africa, amongst others, will have a role to play in this. Let me welcome Bold One South Africa leader Mmusi Maimane into this conversation. Mmusi, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's a great privilege to be with you.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And of course, you are coming to us from a wet Cape Town. We hope that everyone is taking care in that part of the country. Mmusi, I want to start off with this cabinet. Obviously, prior to the elections, the talk was there going to be a cabinet that exceeded the previous one of the sixth administration, 75 members. I know you've been very critical with regards to this. Is the number just too big for this current administration?
This administration shows the fact that it's the largest we've had in democratic history. And secondly, it speaks to the compromises that have been made in achieving this GNU. We all as South Africans must realize that our challenges still remain, whether they are on the economy, whether they are on health, whether they are on education. And therefore, it becomes important that every resource that we have in this country is dedicated towards that work. To bloat the cabinet and have multiple deputy ministers is only what could be described as President Ramaphosa ensuring that his party does not feel that it's had any losses, but it also means that for many of this GNU, all it can end up achieving is just a bloated administration, which makes it even harder to harmonize policy position.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because the parties that are involved in this GNU have different policies, and we see, a portfolio is being occupied by, what was once the opposition parties in that sixth administration or before. There's lekotlas that are going to be happening, as the government is saying, but it's good. How do you see this panning out, Mmusi, that when you look at policies, it's going to be very different, especially when it comes to international relations, especially when it comes to health, and especially something that you're quite passionate about, and that's education?
No, undeniably. And that's why we've battled, because when I asked the question to the ANC negotiators, and I said to them, how exactly do we have a plan so that we know what the objectives of administration is, so that when you join the GNU, you are joining something a bit like hopping into a car that you know where it's going. Not enough just to have a seat in the car. It's important to know where it's going. And I called for a convention where those things can be discussed. They simply said, no, it is important to set the government up first, and then we can have a convention later. And my humble submission was that it was putting the cart before the horse. I cannot see how they'll be able to harmonize policy positions. They argued the case that they would put manifestos together and do an analysis on those issues, to which my response was, almost in every manifesto, you've got a statement that says we oppose corruption. But you end up with the ANC sending Zizi Kodwa, who is out on bail, back to Parliament. How is that an expression of a commitment to fighting corruption? And it's so words on paper, on manifestos, can remain that if you are willing to sell out for a cabinet position or any of those things, because eventually it will mean that even on issues like foreign policy, we can safely assume it will be the ANC's policy, because it's the ANC that is leading this grand coalition.
Mmusi, I want to touch on, you mentioned this dialogue or convention that you had put forward to. I spoke to various other civil societies. They said that, there needed to be time for this cabinet to be made, which meant getting together different parties involved. And lo and behold, 48 hours after I had that conversation with them, the cabinet was announced. Was this cabinet rushed? Did there needed to be more, like you said, conventions or dialogues to find a pathway for inclusivity within this seventh administration?
On the 29th of May, after the elections, I attended the results center and I made the statement to say the first priority would be for the president to call a meeting of all 18 party leaders and at least put together a plan for the seventh administration. That call fell on deaf ears. The next, we went to the Chief Justice, to which the Chief Justice responded by saying it'd be important that the president does this work upon election. And after the president's election, I made the same call because it was really a way of being able to say the majority of the parties that were voted in the main at some point agreed on the NDP, even as a basic example. It would not take too long to update from the NDP and actually come up with tangible plans on water, electricity, all of those things. And so once the election of the president has been decided, there is no other constitutional pressure that forces you to appoint cabinet. It would then be important to invite civil society after that, and these could be exercises that were put on multiple weekends, that even if we were to wait for a week, it would mean that post that, you can then, before the opening of parliament, have a cabinet that had a plan and use State of the Nation to announce the cabinet as a way to lead South Africa going forward. What we have done now is really elected parties without knowing what the priority is. And the dilemma that I faced up with was, for example, there were many parties that made many things during their manifesto calls. There were others who were calling for a death penalty. There were others who foreign policy was not something that everybody aligned on. So did that mean if you are part of the government of national unity and the constitutional imperatives that enjoins cabinet collectively, does that mean you endorse the views of all of those parties?
Mmusi, let's come to Boulder in South Africa, and of course you are in that National Assembly. The last time you were there, you were the leader of the Democratic Alliance. At that time, it was, of course, the official opposition to the African National Congress. So how does Boulder in South Africa approach its role within the National Assembly for this seventh administration?
We have made it quite clear that we want to be a constructive opposition. What that means is that when there are issues we agree with, we will vote and support. For example, there's an appropriations bill that is coming up in a few weeks, and there are various portfolios that have to vote on their budget. We endorse that view. The government must have money to spend. But where the government wants to do things that are corrupt, illegal, and are not going to add value to 60 million South Africans, i.e., sending Zizigotwa to parliament, i.e., bloating the cabinet and making sure every person who can spell minister has a car and aid and spends money. The reality of it is that we can't accept that. It means that right now, as we speak, when you are protecting ministers, communities don't have policemen to look after them. Yet every minister must have 2 bodyguards, etc. These people were not in danger last week. Now they're in danger this week. So all of these realities, we have to be constructive. But where we agree on, let's build South Africa, let's build infrastructure, let's educate our young people, let's build a strong economy, let's change our energy infrastructure so that it brings people more, we will support that entirely.
Mmusi, one final question. Of course, there's big talk about a push from the ANC for portfolio chairs to be there. Is Build One going to put its name to be chairs of some of the portfolios? I can think of one portfolio that I think you'd definitely be interested in. That's, of course, education. But is there others that maybe you'd be looking at and thinking that Build One South Africa needs to be part of so that they can make their specific impact?
We're certainly looking at SCOPA, which is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. That portfolio is important because all the public accounts have to be accounted for. And convention has shown the fact that it's been offered to the opposition. And it was true since the 1994 administration, and you've had various chairs of SCOPA. It would be a welcome opportunity as a party that's not in the GNU to help hold the government account by making sure that all public enterprises, portfolios can come and give accountability in that space. And I think there's something positive about that portfolio to go. And of course, I've suggested that I can serve in education and certainly the Department of International Relations.
Mmusi, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Much appreciated.
That's Mmusi Maimane, the leader of Build One South Africa. Yes, of course, the last chair of SCOPA in the sixth administration was Khululeko Klengwa, was of the IFP, was the opposition of the African National Congress. So interested to see, whether this GNU would go with a SCOPA chairperson that is from the GNU, or they may elect somebody from the opposition. One would feel that within a constitution, there has to be a sense of impartiality, but we wait and see what happens with regards to that. That's all we have for you here from News in Focus, from myself, Ross Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Wherever you are in the country, stay warm, stay safe, and make sure that we pray for the South Africans who do not have the same privileges as many of us are, but in this very cold and wet condition of the country. From myself, Ross Patel, the rest of the team in Johannesburg, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.